suicide increases dramatically. These men just feel so incredibly guilty because they cannot support their wife and children, or because they abandon their wife and children and then kill themselves. Women, they cannot support their family. Their husbands are gone, their fathers are gone, they kill themselves. Massive sexual abuse. Women get a job and their boss says, you want to keep this job? Come to my office during lunch. You don't like it? Find another job. And of course, tremendous alcoholism. Unemployment, when there is a lack of a social safety net, has a tremendous, massive, negative effects on American society. And then we have the bonus army. After every war, starting with the American Revolution, the federal government has given the veterans, the survivors of the conflict, a little something for their effort. Usually it was a check. Sometimes it was a pension, a check every month, but usually it was something. After World War II, we have something called the GI Bill, still in existence today. The GI Bill did stuff like pay for my undergraduate studies, paid for my house, paid for my books at that time. Another aspect of the GI Bill is a home loan. I got a federally supported home loan. How much did I have to put down? 0. I didn't, because that's really a stupid thing to do, is not to put money down. We saved for it. But the federal government guarantees the loan, so it's much easier to get a loan. You go to a bank and the bank says, well, you don't make that much money. And the federal government says, well, if this person doesn't pay off the loan, Uncle Sugar will. Not only that, but banks have to give veterans at least 1 point less or 1 point lower in interest than the national average. So when my wife and I bought our house in 2003, the national average was 3.5%. So the interest rate on my house was 2.5%. That's really good. So government does something today for veterans. It's called the GI Bill. At that time, until World War II, the government gave veterans money, bonuses. Well, World War I veterans had not been paid their bonus. Here it is, 1932. Congress passes a bill to appropriate $1 billion in aid to veterans. Some of it went to some of it was in the form of a check, immediate aid. Some was other things, Veterans Administration, hospital care, all sorts of aid. $1 billion in aid, and President Hoover vetoes it. So, thousands upon thousands of World War I veterans, and I would say 15,000 is a good guess. 15,000 World War I veterans and their spouses and their children march on Washington, D.C. in 1932, and they set up camps outside the Capitol. Here's some photographs of these folks. Well, Hoover's a little anxious, a little worried with 15,000 guys milling around. And one day, a couple of Washington, D.C. policemen have a run-in with some of these, what they call bonus marchers. And they shoot them and they kill them. Now the bonus marchers get really pissed off. And now Hoover is super, super scared because there's 15,000 men outside of this Capitol and they're upset. So, President Hoover instructs the Army Chief of Staff, General Douglas MacArthur, to remove the bonus marchers. His second in command, Dwight David Eisenhower, doesn't think this is a very good idea. And privately, he tells MacArthur, don't do it. Well, here's what MacArthur does. MacArthur calls up a cavalry regiment and a tank regiment. The tank regiment was commanded by a guy named George S. Patton. MacArthur, Eisenhower, and Patton will all become really, really, really famous during World War II. MacArthur will be in charge of the Pacific He gives that famous speech, "I shall return," when the Japanese kicked the Americans out of the Philippines. MacArthur, during the Korean War, is going to publicly call for the U.S. to drop atomic bombs on China. Dwight David Eisenhower becomes the, quote, supreme Allied commander of World War II. He's in charge of everybody. And he launches the D-Day invasion, which is the beginning of the end of World War II. He is a major military hero, and thus will become president. George Patton is probably the most beloved, the most well-known general during World War II. He's the first to cross the Rhine River after D-Day and the U.S. attempt to bring down Germany. And he sends a telegram back to Eisenhower. Patton was kind of a rude guy, and the telegram to Eisenhower to let Eisenhower know that the U.S. is in Germany. The border between France and Germany is the Rhine River, and this is what Patton sent in the telegram to the Supreme Allied Commander, quote, "I just pissed in the Rhine." They attacked the bonus marchers with bayonets, with their rifles, with tear gas. They set their cars, they set their tents on fire. They attacked women, they attacked children. And at the end, President Hoover publicly tells MacArthur he did a good job. Eisenhower writes up a report in which he privately, verbally spanks his superior MacArthur for what he does, but publicly Eisenhower, being the good team player he is, said MacArthur did a good job. Do you think this is going to bode well for the American public when current members of the military are in combat with veterans of the military? Well, people all over the country went to their capitals. People in Texas went to Austin. People in Washington went to Olympia. People on the East Coast went to Washington, D.C., demanding government action. And of course, Hoover did next to nothing because that was the mentality. One, the economy is cyclical, there's nothing they can do about it. And two, your success or failure is your own. And so if you fail, you got nobody to blame but yourself. Well, the hardest hit group or subgroup of Americans will be African Americans. Yeah, you'll hear numbers like average unemployment was 25%. Well, that's basically horrifically misleading. Unemployment of white men was about 10%. Unemployment of African American men was nearly 50%. Unemployment of African American women was over 80%. So there were huge differences in the unemployment rates based on color of your skin. Here you see a photograph of African American women and children, and what's missing? Men. As I said before, all men knew is there are no jobs here, there's jobs someplace else, and they are looking for those jobs. His pictures suggest abject poverty. Look at that porch, look at the walls of that structure. Look at the chair. Where is this woman's shoes? Now you got these three young African-American boys playing on a back porch that looks pretty nice, certainly nicer than that. We got this, we got that. We got this, we got that. Well, their mother got a job as a servant in this house. So this is where the boys hang out, on the porch, while their mom's at work. Millions of Americans lost their dwellings, and the vast majority were apartment renters. And so people came together and created their own villages, their own towns. They found cardboard, they found tar paper and cinder blocks and pieces of wood, and they built shelters, and they called their shelters Hoovervilles. This one here is in Chicago. This is the elevated train known as the L. This is in Seattle. It's not there now, but this will eventually be the place of the Kingdom, which got exploded, or I should say imploded, I think in 97, 98, somewhere, maybe 99. Anyhow, Hoovervilles. Banks were locked. Banks were closed. You could not go into a bank to have business. You would have these walk-up tellers, and banks would hire police to guard them. One of the new career choices of young men was that of bank robbers during the Great Depression. I'm not sure if it was John Dillinger or somebody else, but one of these bank robbers were captured by the police one day, and a reporter asked him, "Why do you rob banks?" And the bank robber said, "Because that's where the money is." This is a job placement business for veterans of the U.S. Navy. I mean, look at the desperation on their faces. Look at them pushing forward, raising their hands, reaching, trying to get something. Look at the exasperation on this guy's face. Look at this guy. It's like some of these guys have just given up. Look at this guy, bending, reaching. He'll take whatever he can get. Very few jobs available. And then there's Bud Fields. One of the most famous families photographed during the Depression. This is Bud. This is Bud's wife. This is Bud's 1, 2, 3 children. And this is Bud's mother-in-law, his wife's mother. This is their house. This isn't a room in their house. This is their entire house. 1, 2, 3 adults and 1, 2, 3 children live here. They look poor, don't they? This kid doesn't have any pants. This kid doesn't have any shoes. No shoes, no shoes, no shoes, no shoes. Who's the only person who has shoes? Bud's mother-in-law. Here's a house in a Hooverville. People are moving out west, and by west I mean the Central Valley of California. Although it's the Depression, people still need to eat, and there are certain regions of this country that grew a lot of food. The Valley here in Texas grows a lot of citrus. The Willamette Valley in Oregon grows a lot of produce. The Eastern Washington grows a lot of produce, and the Central Valley of California grows everything. And so people are going to the Central Valley. You can't really tell from this photograph, but these are Americans. And here's what's going to happen. Most of these agricultural organizations, businesses, hired Mexicans to work in the fields. Because according to our salary scale or pay scale in this country, you would be paid not on your skills, not your education, on your experience, but on your age, on your gender, and on your race or ethnicity. So, men would be paid more than women, adults would be paid more than children, white people would be paid more than non-white people, and American citizens would be paid more than foreigners. So, you're going to want to hire foreigners, and of course, female children foreigners, but they don't do so well in the agricultural field. So what we have going on in the Central Valley of California are farming corporations hiring Mexicans. Well, during the Depression, the Mexican workers will be kicked out as a way of the California farm companies demonstrating patriotism. And they're going to hire the American workers. Well, a lot of these American workers will come from North Texas and southern and western Oklahoma. And they're going to come, a few 100,000 of them, to a city called Bakersfield. And they're going to bring with them their traditions. And their tradition includes a uniquely Southern type of music, known as country music. Country music was typically stories or morals about how to act or what happens when you don't act correctly in society. They typically are really sad. They're slow, like a funeral dirge. Well, they move out to Bakersfield, and the type of music that was popular in Bakersfield was known as Western music. Western music was a little bit more up-tempo. You could dance to it. The songs were not as depressing. Well, the culture of the Southern music, country music, and the culture of the West Coast music, Western music, came together in Bakersfield, and the people in Bakersfield, the immigrants, the Okies who moved there, as well as the Californians, created a new type of music called country Western music. So it's going to have the upbeat tempo of Western music with somewhat of the morals or the stories of traditional country music. And the huge, the stars of country Western music in the 50s were children in Bakersfield in the 30s and 40s. Well, in 1928, the Republican President Herbert Hoover gets elected. He runs against a Roman Catholic, a guy named Al Smith, who's also a really, really, really good friend of a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In fact, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave the speech at the Democratic Convention that nominated Al Smith. Normally, the person who gives those nomination speeches is the guy, or maybe someday the woman, who's next in line to run for that political party. Who gave the nomination speech at the 2004 Democratic Party convention? A state senator from Illinois named Barack Obama. So, Al Smith, Hoover, here's the results. Hoover clearly dominates this election. Smith wins in a lot of the southern states, and he takes, what is that? Looks like Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Insignificant. 4 years later, it is a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Democrat, relatively well-known. First, he's from the Roosevelt family. He's a cousin of Teddy Roosevelt. Two, just like his cousin, he was involved in politics in New York and was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So he's a relatively known guy. Also one of the wealthiest men in the United States. So Hoover runs against Smith in 28. 4 years later, in 1932, Hoover, the Republican, runs for re-election against Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Democrat, and here are the results. Boom! Kind of a landslide. Hoover wins in 28, FDR wins in 32. 28, 32. 28, 32. Kind of amazing.